culture of CFS and ME, one of the most common metaphors used is that of spoons. According to this popular framework, individuals begin each day with a few spoons of energy. Every task, brushing teeth, cooking food, having a conversation, activity, takes one or more spoons away, until once the spoons are gone, there's nothing left. This metaphor has been embraced because it resonates with the lived experience of depletion, collapse, and unpredictability. But while this language validates the struggle in the same way that this whole framing around mitochondria does, it risks reinforcing a fundamental misunderstanding that people with CFS-ME do not have energy. And this interpretation echoes a biomedical reductionism that equates energy only with mitochondria or calories, neglecting the broader psychophysiological and depth psychological realities. The truth is subtler and much more hopeful. Energy is not absent, but bound. And to understand this, we must rethink clearly what energy really means. Energy is not only physical fuel, sorry about the banging, it's also psychological, emotional, and relational. As Carl Jung emphasised, the psyche itself is organised around libido, not merely a sexual drive, but the fundamental psychic energy, the life force that animates all living expression. Modern affective neuroscience has converged with this. Emotion is not a cognitive afterthought, but the biological force of life itself. Energy in motion, emotion. In CFS-ME, the body is not failing to generate energy, but is using tremendous amounts of energy to hold back, repress, and contain emotions, impulse, and survival actions that were once deemed unsafe. And the paradox is striking. Fatigue is the result not of too little energy, but of too much energy spent in repression. To challenge this mitochondria and spoon model, we must first ask, what is energy? Biologically, energy is the capacity for action, generated by cellular processes and distributed through the nervous system and musculature. Psychologically, however, energy is synonymous with affect. Emotions are not abstract states of mind, but embodied mobilizations of energy designed to meet life. As I said, emotion, energy, emotion. Jaak Panksepp, the father of affective neuroscience, described 7 core emotional states hardwired into the mammalian brain: seeking, rage, fear, care, lust, panic and grief, play also. Each is a dynamic stream of neural energy that propels behaviour and expression. Antonio Damasio emphasised that feelings are the subjective experience of homeostatic energy, shifts in the body guiding our choices and survival. And Carl Jung wrote long before neuroscience, and he intuited the same truth: libido is the life force energy of the psyche. When it flows, creativity, vitality arise. When it is blocked or repressed, symptoms appear. And from this perspective, the greatest form of energy is not glucose or ATP, but emotion. Energy in motion, and it's meant to move. Or precisely, its energy is emotion. So where is the energy gone if it's not available to us? Well, if emotion is energy, why does someone with CFS-ME feel so profoundly drained? And to be clear, I had CFS-ME for over 20 years and was in bed for about 5 of those. Not just resting, but absolutely pretty much immobilized. This is not tiredness for anyone in doubt here. This is a complete lack of power, like you've been taken out of the mainframe. Sorry about that noise. My neighbours are having their windows done. So the answer is not that the energy is missing, but that it's been diverted into what we call the shadow, into repression. When we are taught implicitly or explicitly that our emotions are unsafe, often as children, that our anger will cause us to be rejected, our grief will overwhelm others or ourselves, our joy would just be too much, we are too much, we learn to repress. Repression is the act of holding emotional energy down and out of awareness. It's something we do consciously and unconsciously. And after a while, it just becomes our default habit. But holding this energy is not free. It requires continuous expenditure of psychic and physiological resources. As Freud noted, repression is costly. It siphons libido, this life force. Jung referred to it more in a sexual way, but it is this life force. And Jung extended this. What is repressed does not vanish, but it sinks into the unconscious and becomes held in the shadow, held in the nervous system, which is why we so often feel so wired whilst feeling so drained. Trauma researchers such as Peter Levine and Bessel van der Kolk have shown that when fight or flight is interrupted, when a child cannot escape a threatening parent, or when grief is not allowed expression, the survival response freezes into the body. It just goes underground. Muscles tense, the autonomic nervous system remains on guard, and incomplete survival energy is just trapped, frozen in the very fibres of the body itself. The body spends enormous energy keeping these impulses contained, like holding back a flood behind a dam. Please excuse this noise. I've been waiting all morning to record this. It's just endless. We will prevail though. So the ego, shaped by attachment wounds and cultural demands, maintains a persona. The ego is the operating centre of consciousness, and it creates for us who it thinks we should be based on our environment so we can fit in and get our needs met. But it's not really us. The bits that don't fit that get put into the shadow. The emotions that can't get felt get put into the shadow. Those survival responses we couldn't feel to completion, pure energy, get put into the shadow to preserve this mask. And the ego expends energy denying or disavowing what does not fit. Rage, despair, longing, vulnerability, who we are, our desires, our impulses, if they don't fit. And over time, this expenditure becomes completely overwhelming. And the ego believes that repression equals safety. But the self, the higher part of us, the truer part of ourselves that contains all of what we are, not just this front-facing part that the ego thinks we are, knows better. What is refused does not disappear. It accumulates underground. And remember, that which is accumulating is energy itself, and then we're taking energy to repress the energy itself. So it's a double whammy, all being sucked out of conscious action into this unconscious place that we, in our conscious minds, have no idea even exists. Systems theory teaches that when energy cannot flow as it is meant to, it stagnates. In physics, energy locked in entropy is unavailable for work. In psychology, energy bound in repression produces fatigue, apathy, or somatic symptoms. Thus, the exhaustion of CFS ME is not a sign of empty batteries, but of batteries miswired, energy caught in recursive loops of suppression. So why would the psyche do this? Well, as I alluded, because at some point repression was adaptive. For a child in a household where anger was punished, hiding anger protected our belonging. For a teenager whose grief was invalidated by society, by their family, by culture, by their gender, numbing grief preserved the fragile bond with those around us and with our caregivers. And for an adult navigating trauma, freezing ensured survival. The ego concluded, feeling is dangerous. We survived. The strategy worked temporarily. And we became the person who didn't consciously feel these things. We became people who just operated at a superficial level of secondary emotion. But as Jung warned, what we resist persists, and this strategy becomes pathology. This override should be temporary, an adaptive behaviour to get us to a place that we can later process our emotions and this energy. So the very attempt to avoid pain creates greater suffering long term. CFS ME emerges as the true self's radical intervention, therefore, stripping the ego of its coping mechanisms withdrawing false energy and forcing the individual back inward towards its emotional truth so it can finally release the energy that it's been holding, often for decades. So this leads us to the crucial factual truth. Fatigue is not true energy loss. And it's a crucial reframing. Fatigue is not lack, but misallocation. It's a lack of available energy because it's gone into the subconscious. So imagine a city during wartime blackouts. The power stations still generate electricity, but most of it is, say, diverted into air raid defences, leaving homes dark. Or picture a house where every appliance is plugged in and draining current on standby. Even though nothing is actively being used, in both cases, the energy exists but is unavailable. And so it is in CFS ME. The mitochondria still produce energy, the body still mobilises resources, but those resources are consumed by hypervigilance, muscle tension, autonomic defence, and of course, repression. The nervous system is locked in protective mode, with energy diverted inward. Neuroscience supports this view. Studies show that overactivation of the amygdala and the default mode network burn energy in constant threat appraisal. It's very expensive to be in this state. Dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system, a consequence of emotional repression, where the body oscillates between sympathetic arousal and parasympathetic shutdown, both are metabolically costly. Increased brain effort, even for simple tasks, reflecting energy waste on inhibition and monitoring rather than present moment action. And thus individuals feel exhausted, not because they don't have any energy, but because their energy is being over-invested in survival circuitry. Why does repression occur in the first place? As I said, the answer lies in relational environments, normally in childhood. And attachment theory shows that children depend absolutely on caregivers and their environments for survival. When a caregiver cannot tolerate a child's authentic feelings, the child learns to exile those feelings to preserve the bond. It's survival. This is not a conscious choice, but a neurobiological adaptation. It happens automatically. Over the years, the pattern becomes automatic. Authenticity equals danger, repression equals safety. I will be what I need to be to get the love, to get the food, to get the shelter, to be included. And this sets the stage for chronic misallocation of energy. Authentic impulses are triggering all the time, but they are triggering threat detection. The nervous system clamps down, consuming energy to maintain inhibition and keep it safely out of consciousness way. And the self's vitality is split, with parts relegated to the shadow, to the subconscious, but the energy is still in there. As trauma theorists emphasise, the body keeps the score. The cost of repression is born in the autonomic nervous system, the musculature, the fascia, the very body in which we live. And the immune system, well, it's dysregulated. Why? Because that energy is being held there, waiting for it to complete. It is dysregulating. It is holding and waiting for the foot to drop, for us to allow what wasn't once completed to complete. And it takes a lot of energy. CFS ME then is not random, but entirely coherent. The body's way of signalling the cost of repression has become finally unstable and unsustainable, and the balance has been tipped. We have to empty the backlog and update where we're at. Illness is effectively the self's orchestration, and by self I mean capital S self, the true us, that which is the totality of who we are, not just the version we had to become to survive. And this is where we arrive at the paradox. The very illness that robs us of the energy is also the self's attempt to restore it. By collapsing the old coping mechanisms, the person we had to be, the things we had to do, the carer, the perfectionist, the this, the that, the achiever, the person who's never angry, the person who is whatever we need to be to survive, is taken away. Fatigue forces surrender. We can no longer carry on in these roles. We can no longer carry on performing the costume. The sufferer can no longer rely on willpower or persona to push through, however much we try, however hard we cling on. And what remains is the stark encounter with self, with the repressed emotions, the frozen energies, and with the shadow, which is why it feels so emotionally dramatic. And in this sense, CFS ME is not a meaningless malfunction, but a purposeful redirection, an invitation to individuation, coming back to ourselves and becoming whole. Jung wrote that symptoms often represent the best possible adaptation. The psyche can make under the circumstances. It has to be subject to what can come into consciousness. And this now is symptoms. If we're not prepared or even aware that these emotions exist in the subconscious, they shapeshift and have to outlet through the body. It can no longer take the charge. The nervous system has become so dysregulated, it has to push the energy through. It can't take it anymore. And this is why often it's one last drop of stress, of physical, psychological, emotional stress, that is the thing that causes the illness to finally start to somaticize as symptoms through the body. And this is for all mind-body illnesses, not just CFS. So whether it's fibro, whether it's pain, or whether it's gut intestinal issues, all of which will be part of this profile, because these are syndromes. This is not like a set thing. These are syndromal presentations. It all is fitting round into the same framework. So the conditions we experience there as a result of this repression, the fatigue, the fibro, all of these other experiences as well, is not a mistake but a message. Return to yourself. Give back and let this repressed energy through, because it's now safe to be you. Feel what's been unfelt. Reclaim your energy by reclaiming your emotions. And this is why the pathway to recovery is restoring emotional energy. Energy is emotion. And if fatigue arises from energy bound in repression, then healing involves restoring the flow and allowing these emotions back. This does not mean trying to think positive or override the body or journal about your emotions, but by creating safe conditions for the body to express the raw emotional charge through the body. For most of us, we are not even aware of what's there, because they're now coming into consciousness as symptoms. So as you allow your symptoms to be experienced, you are allowing the emotions, and in time they will start to be made more obvious. We need to establish a witness awareness, what we describe as a mirror awareness. And this allows emotions to be observed without us collapsing into them, as if we were just a mirror with a reflection. We stand back, we allow ourselves to witness and experience the emotion in the body, which is the only place emotions can be processed, but realizing we are not the thing we're experiencing. And this creates safety and disidentification from fear. And this is really called allowing. It's a neutral, embodied, observational presence that simply stands back and lets nature correct what we have made so one-sided. And allowing is absolutely key. It's part of the pillars we teach here, and it's the number one, is to simply allow everything, but in a slow, titrated way, because it would overwhelm us, which is why we do a schedule, which we'll be talking about later as well. Emotions must be felt, not analysed. And to be clear, please watch the videos on the difference between primary emotions and secondary emotions, because what you're probably experiencing as emotions are not actually emotions. Primary emotions are physiological, secondary emotions are psychological. And real emotions have to be felt in the body. This is the life force, this is the energy. Everything else is just a feeling about a feeling. So they have to be experienced somatically in the body, where they're now showing up as the sensations, as the symptoms, as the fatigue, as the pain. ADP and other body-based approaches emphasize titration. Small doses, moment by moment, 30 seconds at a time, allowing yourself to be embodied, allowing yourself time each day just to be in the body. is good enough to start. And if you just work with what's in your body, you can't overwhelm yourself. You can't do too much because it's already here. And it's being orchestrated, as I said, by the self that can read your internal capacity of the nervous system and how much the defensive ego that's trying to keep who it thinks you are safe, aka away from those nasty emotions that once were too much, can take before it just goes, all right, you're doing it all the time. I accept. This is us now. And each completion of emotional impulse releases energy back into circulation, drip by drip by drip, which re-regulates the nervous system because it has more space within it, and it goes back closer to homeostasis. The energy is not only released from the shadow, but the energy that was being used to hold it there is also made available to us for movement, growth, and forward progression. The nervous system must finish what was once interrupted. There is no way around it. The only way out is through. We have to experience that which was suppressed, which was interrupted, now through the body. And as you start to do the work, you will feel it, trembling, crying, heat, buzzing, vibrating, nausea, gurgling, all of these things that you can actually feel energy moving around. You might have deep random breaths, short breaths. Your body knows what it's doing. Just let it do whatever it wants to. Burping, sneezing, all sorts of things, gagging, retching. It's moving this repressed primary emotional energy and survival energy around the body to complete. The body will update and energy is freed back into the ecosystem, into the organism that is you. It's really, really important to emphasize how important it is to have a strict schedule to do this, because structure provides containment. A consistent schedule retrains the amygdala, reduces hypervigilance, and gradually opens the window of tolerance. It expands our ability to experience what is frankly hellish, because we're having to expose ourselves to these emotions. They're then having to update, so we flare, it's chaos, it's this, that, and the other that just feels too unbearable to our ego. I've done too much, I've done this. No, you haven't. You have to be able to do the same thing day in, day out, every single day until it's in, and then you increase. And if there's one day you can't do it, that says to the brain, told you, it was dangerous, and we have to do it again. And this is why we boom and bust. This is why we yo-yo. So there'll be other videos on the schedule, but the schedule must be based on what you can do on your worst flare day. And if you can do something repeatedly, 24/7, 365 days a year, although you won't have to, you'll be increasing things by then, the amygdala says, she's doing it, even though she's in absolute hell, must be safe. And it will reappraise its threat, it will retag it, and that thing will be in. Update. That's the way it works. So the ultimate aim is not merely symptom relief. Symptoms, we don't aim to get rid of symptoms, although of course we do. But it's ultimately balance and wholeness. Then the symptoms just disappear naturally as we re-regulate naturally. In the same way, we don't try and re-regulate the nervous system. The system will re-regulate naturally when we allow the emotions in the shadow and the symptoms that are fronting for them as their emissaries to be felt. As this shadow material is integrated, as we allow within a schedule, the self reclaims its rightful energy. The life force, once siphoned into repression, flows again into creativity, vitality, authenticity, and relationship with oneself and one's environment. So, to conclude, the myth that people with CFS ME have no energy collapses when we recognize that energy is not simply fuel measured in calories or ATP, but the fundamental force of life itself. The exhaustion of CFS ME reflects not the absence of energy, but the cost of misdirected energy, the fact there is no available energy because it's gone underground into the subconscious to repress the energy of emotions themselves and survival energy. And this is energy bound in repression, in the shadow, in incomplete survival responses, in the vigilance of an ego that once believed that feeling was unsafe. So to say emotions are energy is not mere poetry, Both depth psychology and neuroscience affirm it. Carl Jung described libido as psychic energy, the raw force of the psyche that fuels imagination, desire, and vitality. When repressed, it becomes a symptom. Candace Pert, the neuroscientist who discovered the opiate receptor, demonstrated that emotions are mediated by neuropeptides and their receptors, molecules that carry information and mobilize physiological states across the entire body. She called them molecules of emotion. She got a book on it. A literal biochemical language linking mind and body. Antonio Damasio showed that emotions are body states. Feelings are the subjective experience of these shifts. Emotion is not epiphenomenal, but a biological force that changes heart rate, muscle tone, digestion, immunity, and cognition. And Jaak Panksepp, effective neuroscientist, mapped the emotional command systems of the mammalian brain, each powered by distinct streams of neural energy designed to move the organism into action for survival, authentically in relation to who we actually are, always reading our internal states pre-verbally as actually true to us. In other words, emotions are not abstract feelings floating in the psyche. They are real, energetic processes involving electricity, chemistry, and physiology. To repress them is to dam a river. The water does not disappear. It builds behind the barrier, requiring tremendous pressure to contain it. The effort to hold back emotion is itself a massive expenditure of energy. Thus the paradox of CFS and ME, the greatest energy of all, emotion, has been exiled from conscious life, only then to drain vitality from the shadows. The body spends its resources holding back the flood, leaving little available for everyday living. But here's the hope. Of course, we can recover from this. I did. You can. It's not easy. It takes time and it's hard work, but follow the system. And I had to make a zillion mistakes, so you don't have to. The same emotions that drain us when repressed are also the very energies that heal us when expressed, when allowed to express. The fatigue that strips away coping mechanisms is the self's way of guiding us back to our truth. By reclaiming our emotional life, this is not something you have to think about, oh my goodness, I have to claim my emotional life. Who am I? What emotion am I missing? No, we just have to allow the symptoms within a schedule to be felt. It will come back online. And you will reclaim your vitality. By feeling what was unfelt, we restore energy to the conscious system, back into the dynamic flow where it should be. We re-regulate, the symptoms are no longer required. The myth of no energy dissolves. It's old and bad science, and we need to understand this now. This is a mind-body condition. There are no mistakes, and this is how we have to work. And deeper meaning then emerges. It's CFS-ME. It's not a depletion, but a redirection, an initiation back to our true selves. When we're out of alignment, when we've been for too long going down the wrong path. Recovery is not about gaining spoons, but about opening the dam, letting the river of feeling flow again to guide us and lead us back to the life that's actually ours, and rediscover the self as the true source of energy.